everyone, it's the Drunken Disorderly Podcast, coming to you live from Raptor Den Studios, which is really just my basement. Not my mom's basement, though. I'm moving up in the world. We are brought to you by the Launchpad Media. Go to thelaunchpadmedia.com for all of your podcasting needs. There's some great stuff on there, like Alex Merced has a podcast. Johnny Rocket's podcast is on the Launchpad Media, and now we are their video podcast on there. So you can go there, check us out. There's not a lot of a back catalog for us because I just started our YouTube channel this weekend, and that was a pain in the ass, by the way. But now we have a YouTube channel. You can check us out there too. Just look for Drunken Disorderly Media on YouTube. A lot of fun stuff happening. Our Facebook hit 3,000 likes at 7:10 tonight, so that was a big deal for us. I actually had the person's name, and I'm like, might not be the best form, so I made myself forget it. But thank you to everyone who liked us today to get us over the hump. And remember, Friday, July 5th, if the LPNE can raise $1,000, and Scott says we're a little over halfway.
We're halfway there.
All right. If the LPNE can raise $1,000 at Freedom Friday.
Between now and Freedom Friday.
Yep. We will live stream me singing. Was it I Want It That Way?
Yep, I Want It That Way by the Backstreet Boys.
Yeah. So if you want to see me suffer in public, go ahead and go to Scott. Give us the website for that.
Oh, it's lpne.org. Libertarian Party in Nebraska. lp.ne.org.
There we go. So with no further ado, Dre, take it away.
Hey, everybody. We are missing Erin tonight. She's got a new job, so she's not going to be able to join us as consistently as she would like. But congrats to her. She is furthering her career. We have Scott tonight. Hey, Scott.
Hi.
And I'm very happy to announce we have Dr. Kyle Varner with us this evening. We would love to talk to you about your new book, White Coat Cartels, which uncovers the dark side of U.S. health market, as well as your work with Venezuelan libertarians and Liberty International, and all of your globetrotting. You are never home. How are you?
I'm good. Thank you guys so much for having me. I'm looking forward to a drunken, disorderly conversation, even though I'm not drinking right now.
It's not a hard and fast rule, but we prefer that you do.
Well, and you're okay. You got an excuse. So.
All right. Very good.
So, Kyle, you're not home right now. You're at a hospital.
Yeah, I'm at a rural hospital in the Southwest. My practice is as a hospitalist, and so I travel around to rural hospitals, and they just called me. So
and he's on call.
Yes, I'm one moment.
He is the doctor, guys.
And he is on
call.
So
I have him on mute so when he comes back.
Okay.
So this is always the fun part of having Kyle on a podcast is you never know when he's going to have to step away for a minute.
He literally just said, it's very highly unlikely they'll call me. I told him I was going to be busy for just an hour. So hopefully, no one's dying or anything right now.
Right.
I'm sure they would come out the door if somebody was dying. They wouldn't
It is only 8:04, and they probably know Kyle, and they probably thought, well, he runs on libertarian time, so maybe they're just not starting on time. Maybe took a chance that we weren't starting on time tonight. So
half the time we do go live at 8:04, so there is that.
Look, that only happened last week because my dumbass had us on the wrong page. Okay, give me a break. Right. I'm old. Okay, you can see that it's going back, and it's great. Look at how gray this beard is.
I don't have any gray hair, and it doesn't grow on my face.
Like if you have a gray beard, we have issues.
I have a gray beard.
I could make some money traveling around. Sideshow.
It's not a freak show anymore. It's not a freak show anymore, dude. It's just.
I you know what? I now identify as a woman, so I'm a woman with a gray beard.
Yeah, done.
Bold and beautiful, brave and beautiful.
Brave and hashtag brave. So when Kyle gets back, something that we're going to talk about. Okay, sorry.
You're totally right.
This is great. Laura Ewing, if Kyle was on Libertarian Time, he wouldn't have shown up. He would be posting about it on Facebook.
And fuck you, and the horse you rode in on. Here's why.
Yeah. I try and stay out of all that. I can't.
I don't have the energy for it, man.
Okay.
Because I know somebody's going to write a damn soliloquy, and I don't want to run down on the points. Welcome back. I hope nobody's dying, right?
Nobody's dying. No, everything is all right. So let's get back to the program.
Good deal. Good deal. So you don't spend a lot of time at home because you're a doctor and you travel, right? Basically to treat people.
Yeah, I travel to rural hospitals and I basically live in the hospital 24/7. I'm in the hospital right now. And so I see all the patients that get admitted to the hospital. So that's what I do.
How long do you stay at one hospital at a time typically?
It's usually a week, but it can be up to 2 weeks, sometimes a little longer, depending on just the needs of the hospital and my schedule and stuff.
And is it always rural? Because they obviously need.
Yeah, it's my preference to work in rural hospitals because I think it's a little more challenging and I enjoy that. But I also do occasionally work at larger hospitals as well. I think it's important to have a mix because you don't see all the type of cases at a rural hospital that you'll see in a teaching hospital. So I try to at least keep my foot in on the medical staff at a couple of tertiary care centers and spend a little time there so that I can stay up to date with things like ICU care and stay up to date with some of the more complex patients as well.
Scott, I'm sorry, did you have something?
No.
Oh, okay. Well, that's cool. So that keeps you busy and traveling to all sorts of cool places. You were in Beijing last week?
Well, I connected through Beijing and I was in Mongolia. I serve on the board of directors of Liberty International, and we just had our Liberty International World Conference in Mongolia. That was really great. Met freedom fighters from all over the world and had a really great time. The North Koreans denounced one of our speakers as an American spy and sent the police after him. So I consider that a great success. If we upset the North Korean regime, we are doing something right.
I guess as long as you're far enough away from the North Korean reach, that's okay.
Right. Well, actually, interestingly, Mongolia is kind of in the North Korean reach because our original speaker had to cancel on us because he was advised by the South Korean security that they couldn't guarantee his safety in Mongolia. There are too many North Korean agents.
Really?
So somebody else with a little bit lower profile came in his place.
Where was the speaker from that was advised not to come?
The speaker was from South Korea, but he's a prominent North Korean defector. So so instead, an American of South Korean origin who works with that organization came in his place and gave his talk for him. But the North Korean regime is a special kind of evil. It may be that there's no other regime on earth quite as evil as the regime of Kim Jong-un.
Yeah, when you see some of the behind the scenes, it's just scary how much that we don't know because what we see is awful enough.
So I got to ask, so what you're saying is that America should go take over North Korea, right? That's what you're advocating.
Is that what you're saying?
Is that what you're saying, Kyle?
No, I'm absolutely not saying North Korea. I think with as much as I hate the North Korean regime, I also realize that liberating North Korea is not a realistic possibility because you risk creating a really large war that makes the situation worse. But if you open up routes of trade, I don't have any illusions that this is going to turn the North Korean regime into good guys, but you're going to open up more avenues for human beings to escape. And you're going to be able to engage, you're going to be able to reduce the tensions. I would like nothing more than to see the regime fall, but I don't see a path forward for that. And so I'd like to see people suffer less. It's not, I can't make the world a perfect place. I wish I could. But I think, an attempt to militarily liberate North Korea would lead to a confrontation with China and potentially with millions of deaths. And that's not something that's good. It's going to be a case where the harms outweigh the benefits.
That's a really good point, though, talking about opening up the lines of trade so that they could have more opportunities to sneak out. Never heard anybody bring that up before. What a great point.
right?
Yeah, it's when you talk to the defectors, you know how much they suffer when they're defecting. Usually, they go across the river in the north, and then they kind of go across through land, through China, up through Mongolia, and eventually get around to South Korea, because South Korea will give them a safe haven and they can have a life there. But they have to go with human traffickers. Many times, these people are forced into forced labor or prostitution along the way. It's a hellish route. I've talked to quite a few North Korean defectors who've told me their stories of suffering, of loss of loved ones and all of that. It's horrible. They can't just say, I want to leave and leave. And of course, the border on the south right now is so militarized. I mean, there's only one case of a military defector who got shot while he was defecting. Yeah. So, if we have more trade, there are going to be more opportunities for people to escape, hopefully by routes that don't involve forced sexual servitude and these kind of things.
That soldier did live, right? Like I think I remember this story.
Yeah, he lived. They actually found that he had a lot of parasites.
Right, I remember that too.
Everybody that comes out of there does, don't they? What is happening with the food? Why are they getting parasites?
That's a condition of poverty, and my suspicion is that most people in the country are not having modern sanitation. And there's just not a very good system of health. These are extremely poor people. Anywhere in the world you go where people are extremely poor, parasites are kind of something that goes along with that. The measures of health that we look at, good nutrition, good sanitation, avoidance of preventable infectious disease, all these things come with wealth. And that comes with capitalism and free markets and security, private property, and all these things. When you don't have those, you have abject poverty, and then people suffer really bad health outcomes.
I don't think socialists think about things like that, when they're talking about it's going to be this little utopia. Well, everyone suffers because they can't get these basic things that are considered, a wealthy person's thing. Soap and hygiene and sanitation is, everybody gets it here. We take it for granted, obviously.
Right. And I am convinced that free market capitalism is the number one most important public health development in human history. We saw that with the development of capitalism in the 1700s, and then the Industrial Revolution, we saw life expectancies go through the roof. We saw infant mortality fall. We saw preventable diseases fall dramatically. And then, in countries that abandoned socialism, similar things happened. When Chile abandoned socialism, infant mortality fell by 50% in 5 years. The life expectancy just kept going up and up and up in Chile. The reason is because people are wealthy. They can do all these important basic things to stay alive. They can afford healthcare. It's very nice that socialists say we're going to distribute free healthcare, but as in all things distributed by government, it's extremely problematic. But when people become wealthy enough to buy healthcare, they buy it and they do better. And so the fundamental thing we should be wondering about and working towards is the development of a system of free market economies, free market capitalism, so that people can get wealthy and their health will be better.
So let's start talking about Venezuela. There is so much to unpack here. I think I know, I have a cursory idea of everything that has transpired in since the election and all that. Can you kind of just give us a couple bullet points and then let us know what is happening and what you're doing and all that? I watched your video today, and thanks for making me cry at work.
Well, thank you for that. So, Venezuela has had problems for the last 100 years because it's been a petro state, and political clientelism ruled the day. It caused a lot of cultural problems and the political cultural problems with basically, the way people view politics in Venezuela is as a system of patrons and clients with petrodollars flowing through the whole system. And so that's been a problem from the very beginning. But in 1999, the Venezuelans elected a demagogue named Hugo Chavez. And Hugo Chavez won the natural resource lottery. So when I say he won the natural resource lottery, I mean he came to power at a time when oil prices reached a historic high. So he was able to upend the entire client and patron system to make everybody his client. And he was able to use these dollars, these petrodollars that flowed into the country like never before, due to something he didn't have anything to do with. But he was able to use that money to undermine the institutions and undermine the rule of law. began chasing out independent judges, replacing them with loyalists, began a ton of programs to make himself very popular at the time, but then also to make access to those programs and access to state jobs dependent on supporting him. And so fast forward to his death, in 2012 or 2013, Hugo Chavez had undermined the rule of law completely, and his predecessor, Nicolas Maduro, took over and continued that process. But by this point, the oil prices had normalized, and now Venezuela was suffering from extreme poverty, and there was no longer this flood of cash. But he had set up kind of a totalitarian system. And one of the interesting things that he did was he actually brought the Cuban military in as an enforcement arm. So he embedded Cuban troops in with all the army units, because in 2002, he almost succumbed to a coup d'etat. And after that coup d'etat is when he really upped the ante. And he, for example, he expanded the number of generals tremendously. So there are about 2,000 generals now. So it's really hard for one or two to kind of rebel against him. Put the Cubans in as people who will inform on you if you appear disloyal, who will shoot you if you try to rebel. So he created this system where rebelling was next to impossible. And then they also, of course, made a system of paramilitaries called colectivos, which are groups armed by the state who take their orders from the state, who are compensated directly with cash and also with the right to run organized crime in their town. So they run basically an extortion racket in every town of Venezuela. And these guys wear masks. They show up and shoot people in public. They're the real enforcers of the regime. So they did all of this. And in 2018, Maduro was up for re-election. He had banned all of the credible opposition candidates. He had from the election. He had used the paramilitaries to suppress opposition activity. He had put the Electoral Council under direct control of his loyalists. He had chased all the Supreme Court justices out of the country and replaced them with loyalists. He also basically stripped the National Assembly, that was actually democratically elected and opposition controlled, of its powers, and created an unconstitutional group called the Constituent Assembly, made up only of members of his party. And invested it with most of the powers of the National Assembly. And so he did all these anti-democratic things, and he held a sham election. It wasn't a real election, it was a sham election, and declared himself the winner. And the National Assembly didn't accept this. The president of the National Assembly, Juan Guaido, was then appointed by the National Assembly and recognized by the Supreme Court in exile. It's important to realize that the Supreme Court justices he chased out of the country didn't leave their offices, and they still meet and they issue opinions. So recognized by the Supreme Court in exile, recognized by the National Assembly, Juan Guaido became president of Venezuela. Recognized now by 50 countries. The countries who are not recognizing Juan Guaido: China, Turkey, Russia. What do they have in common? They're all authoritarian states run by dictator-like strongmen who obviously have common cause with Nicolas Maduro. And so since then, there's been this tremendous effort to get the military to switch sides, an effort that's been unsuccessful because of the Cuban enforcers within the ranks of the military. There's been this tremendous effort to restore law and order to Venezuela that as of yet has been unsuccessful, but that is still going forward. I'm committed to helping in whatever way I can. And the Venezuelan people are desperate for a little bit of freedom and a little bit of free markets, because they're suffering really terribly right now.
So I read today, I can't remember who did this, but during one of the elections, the doctors were instructed to use medical care as leverage for votes. Was that right? The majority?
Yeah, this was the last election. This was the election that some scholars from the Ron Paul Institute are touting as a legitimate and reason that the world should recognize Nicolas Maduro. And doctors were instructed to use medical care as leverage for him, to question people on their intentions to vote, to withhold oxygen from so that it would be available closer to the time of the election and it would be usable as leverage. So this is extremely inhumane, extremely undemocratic, and it undermines the claims of anybody might have that Nicolas Maduro is a legitimate leader. He is a criminal, and his government is not a government, it is a mafia. And I think it's important that we realize that. And when people start calling Nicolas Maduro president or saying that he has some kind of a government, what they're really doing is making a mockery of the idea of democracy and making a mockery of this situation. Nicolas Maduro is a criminal.
So you've gotten some heat today on Twitter from the Ron Paul Institute guys.
Right.
So tell us about that, and then tell us where do we go from here? Like,
sure.
Obviously you don't advocate for the US going in and just cracking skulls. Like, what is the answer?
Right. So about a month ago, roughly a month ago, one of the libertarian activists in Venezuela who had been arrested and beaten up by Maduro's thugs and then released asked me if I could make a video to show the libertarian community in Venezuela that they have the support of the global libertarian community. And I agreed. I had been in a film studio making some health education videos for my business, drvarner.com. And so I quickly made that video. It's about a 10-minute video. Okay.
It's a very, very professional video that's 10 minutes long. Kyle's just like, yeah, I just threw it together.
Well, no, I mean, I had a professional crew working with me, which was very nice to have. And so I had this video, we made the video, and then the first thing we did was sent it to our libertarian contacts in Venezuela. And most states of Venezuela, the libertarians, Movimiento Libertario Venezuela, had gatherings where they showed it in person before it was released in public. We let them know, you guys, we have your back. We support you and we admire you. Because I think the really important message for me to tell these people is, you guys are heroes of freedom. You're working under conditions that I can't even imagine. You're taking risks I can't imagine. You're sacrificing in ways I can't imagine. And I admire you. You guys are doing great things, and I wanted them to know that. And I also wanted to tell them in no uncertain terms about the virtues of capitalism and free markets. And I wanted to tell them that I support the same plan that they support. So let me outline what that plan is. It's supporting the transitional presidency of Juan Guaido. Let me make it very clear. Movimiento Libertario Venezuela is not a group that is a fan of Juan Guaido. We have huge ideological differences with him. And those ideological differences mean that it will never support him in an election for president. But he's the president, right? The interim president right now, and his job is to get us to a point, or get them to a point of free elections. And then when there are free elections, there will the Movimiento Libertario Venezuela is going to be supporting a capitalist option. And that capitalist option is Maria Corina Machado, who is the leader of Vente Venezuela. She has been a strong opponent of socialism through her entire 20-year political career in Venezuela. She's an excellent leader, and she has excellent ideas about how to move Venezuela beyond this client-patron system, this petrostate system, and into a free market society. Her slogan is radically liberal, radicalmente liberales. Liberal in Spanish has the connotation of libertarian. It doesn't have the connotation we have in the United States for the word. So that's the next step. And then the next step after that is that libertarians around the world are going to send our best and brightest to help her in whatever way she needs, because there are people in the libertarian movement who have been very active in Eastern Europe after the fall of communism. And you can do privatization and market-based reforms well, or you can do them poorly. And we've got a huge network of people who know exactly based on their experience how to do this kind of thing well. And so we're going to be there to support Maria Corina Machado as she goes about transforming Venezuelan society. We're giving her the advice on how to do these things well, making sure that she'll never lack for good, high quality, free market-based advice and support. And then, of course, the final thing that needs to happen is that the people involved in the Maduro mafia need to receive justice. And so those are the 5 steps that I outlined. They're not my plan. They're Movimiento Libertario Venezuela's plan. And I outlined that plan as a way of showing that I understand what they're doing and that I support what they're doing and stand ready to continue supporting it. Nick Farwark of the National Libertarian Party shared my video, and it got a lot of support. I got hundreds of messages from Venezuelans. I got a lot of messages from libertarians, but then some people with the Ron Paul Institute decided they didn't like the video because they support Nicolas Maduro. I can only speculate as to why, but they support Nicolas Maduro. They attack Juan Guaido on a regular basis. They understand next to zero about the actual situation on the ground, and they associate openly with leftists who are, for example, participated in the embassy invasion here in Washington. So they're a group of people who are highly questionable in regards to their political affiliations and regards to the people who they support. They attacked Nick Sarwark for sharing the video. They've attacked me. I've written a response. The executive director of the Ron Paul Institute is not very good in terms of his ability to engage intellectually. The first thing he said to me on Twitter was, "You lose, you say dumb things." So he called me dumb. And last night he actually called me, or an article I wrote, it's not clear because he's not so good with grammar either, but he called me a turd. And this is.
Why didn't he just call you a duty head and get it over with?
I don't know. I wasn't.
That's the level he's operating on right now. You smell, you're a dirty head, you have germs or fleas. That's what I'm hearing.
Right. It's extremely distressing to see that somebody is going to be supposedly a leader in the anti-war movement, which is a movement I support, and is going to use such low-level rhetoric that will never convince anyone of anything. I mean, the poverty of thought and the poverty of intellectualism and the low quality of information coming out of the Ron Paul Institute is sad. And it's sad because if they're the ones fighting for world peace, we better get ready for World War II, because they're completely ineffective. They resemble a Russian troll farm far more than they resemble serious intellectuals.
So, devil's advocate, what if anything should we do, or the U.S. military government do, as in regards to Venezuela and Maduro and Guaido? Because you have a lot of people saying we should go in, we should help them out, and most libertarians are not for helping with regime change.
Well, I don't think anybody should go in militarily unless they ask for it. And there's a provision by which they can ask for it. Article 187 of the Venezuelan Constitution can be invoked, and that authorizes foreign military activity in the country. President Guaido has not invoked that despite strong calls for him to do so. I think that the Venezuelan National Assembly, which is the legitimate government, would need to invoke that. They would need to request the help. Do I think it would be a good thing for American troops to go there? No, because I think it would exacerbate ideological tensions. Do I think Colombia might? I think Colombia might be a better option. Colombia has a very strong vested interest in resolving this crisis. 1 million refugees are on their border right now. Disease is spreading within Colombia because of the bad conditions. And so what I would say is that Colombia and Brazil really need to step up to the plate. Brazil has some problems because their military is divided because, the previous leftist government in Brazil had in many ways kind of tampered with the military. And so there are still some left-wingers in the military in Brazil. And Jair Bolsonaro doesn't have complete control. And so Brazil is probably not an option. But Colombia is, and I don't think it would take a huge force. So I think Colombia may be an option. Another option may be a private army. There are 1,000 Venezuelan soldiers on the border right now who have defected, who can't, the Colombian government is not allowing to go back. There are a lot of people who want to take up arms in Venezuela against the Maduro mafia, but it's hard to come by guns. So
I was just going to say, where are they going to get the arms? Didn't they take them all?
We have firearm export regulations in the United States that prevent Americans from sending them arms. I would gladly help arm the opposition, but I can't legally do it. I think one of the most important libertarian things we could do is to let Americans contribute voluntarily to our brothers and sisters south of us who are fighting for their freedom, and let us arm them. The government doesn't need to do this.
I remember somebody telling me that there was a gun called the Liberator, because everybody tells me everything that is ever made with my last name, that they used to airdrop in World War II. I can't remember what country, but it's like a one shot, and then you can use it to kill people in another way. But it was a pretty cool thing.
I don't know about this, but I know that if the opposition were armed, that it wouldn't be safe. That if you're in the military, it no longer becomes so safe to support the Maduro mafia. And right now, the safe thing to do is to support the Maduro mafia because of the Cuban supporters. And I think you would see a major sea change if you saw even a moderate amount of armed resistance. But the Venezuelans have to be able to step up and begin this themselves. And American troops will not be, I think, an ideal solution, and I would be against that. But that doesn't mean that we as individual Americans can't help, but our government needs to get out of the way.
So from what I've heard, Russia and Cuba are both providing kind of not military assistance, but like military expertise. Is that true? Am I hearing correctly?
Right. So, well, Russia has been, for example, maintaining their anti-aircraft systems and giving them financial support in exchange for gold, and they've been kind of acting as a mule for gold to get around sanctions. And so that's been Russia's primary role. But Cuba's role is to have Cuban troops embedded in their military. They have a Cuban military base in Venezuela. The Cubans are, they've been, since Hugo Chavez invited them into the country, they've been a force for totalitarianism, and they run intelligence units. There are many Venezuelans who would say that they're under a Cuban invasion that's just not being recognized. So that's, when you want to talk about non-interventionism, I think you need to be equally concerned about interventionism from the U.S. as you need to be about interventionism from Cuba. Cuba has had a tremendously deleterious impact on the entire Latin American region ever since the Castro Revolution. They've sent armed Marxists to most countries in Latin America. And we can't ignore this. They're a force of violence and a force of destabilization, and they're working to keep Maduro in power.
Do you think so? I've always been not always, but for most of my adult life, I've been kind of the opinion that libertarians hyper focus on their own government's failing so much that sometimes we forget that the rest of the world sucks too.
Right. And I think that might be the underlying motivation of the Ron Paul Institute. They recently published an article attacking the demonstrators in Hong Kong because they may have been supported by the National Endowment for Democracy. It seems to me that basically they're so against war that they're willing to slander the victims of oppression. They're willing to support dictators if only it means they can put a finger in John Bolton's eye. And I'm no fan of John Bolton, but I'm not going to attack decent people who are suffering as a way of putting a finger in his eye. That's just immoral, and it's also unwise because decent people everywhere reject that kind of argument. You need to be serious, you need to be decent if you want to work on creating a more peaceful world. You don't need to act like a troll.
Right. There's plenty of other reasons to stick a finger in John Bolton's eyes. We don't need to make them up. Just like everything, right. Everybody else.
Look at what's going on with Iran. If you want to be a credible force in opposing war with Iran, you should try not squandering your credibility by supporting petty dictators in Venezuela and supporting the talking points of the Chinese Communist Party in Hong Kong. You need, if you want to be credible, you need to start recognizing the reality, and that is that there is evil in this world, and that while there is some evil in our government, it exists everywhere. And that you need to call out evil where it is, because decent people expect that, and they're not going to listen to a Maduro defender when they talk about peace in the Middle East. You can't defend evil people anywhere.
It can't be okay over here and not okay over here. It's never okay.
Right. So, I see a question here from Josh Fletcher. He says, loving the discussion. What's the best way to actually shift these countries towards the free market? And I think that's very crucial for us to answer. And obviously, I think trade plays a big role, right? We need to trade freely, even with places that are doing horrible things. But the other part of this is something I'm really focused on with my work with Liberty International. We have Liberty Camps, which are events where we take young college students and entrepreneurs to kind of a campground-like environment or conference center-like environment. We have a 3 to 5 day program where we talk about classical liberal philosophy, about libertarianism, and about entrepreneurship. We recently hosted a free market academy in Mongolia that's hosted every year. We even have free market classes in China that we sponsor. And so I think education is huge. And I'm committed to continuing to do that, because you have to be able to tell people what the ideas are that are necessary to get out of this kind of hell that these authoritarian governments are imposing on people.
And that's kind of the work you do with Liberty International, right? You guys travel around and kind of school people on libertarianism and liberty and freedom and how to achieve those things, right?
Right. And I'm really proud of that work. In the last couple of years, I've gone to Singapore, where I talked about the virtues of being a lawbreaker. I did that in an authoritarian country. I've been to Poland. I've spoken in Poland. I've spoken in Uganda, where I gave multiple talks to a group of 80 students about the finer points of capitalism and about some finer points of libertarian philosophy. And we talked actually with some local Ugandans about the possibility of maybe this year or next year founding the Libertarian Party of Uganda. So I'm really hopeful that I'm going to get to go back to Uganda and join them for their founding and for all of that. So there's a lot of stuff we're doing. And in about 2 weeks, I'm going to Colombia. I'm going to be giving a talk sponsored by the Libertarian Party of Colombia in Bogota. And then I'm going to be giving direct medical care to refugees in Cucuta. And so these are all things I'm really excited about. This is the most important thing to me. I work in medicine and I love medicine, but I love way more when I get to go and spread libertarian ideas all over the world.
I hear you. Totally. I can't imagine how rewarding that must be to be able to do both,
It is very, very rewarding. Sometimes it's exhausting, but I'm willing to put up with these.
Sure.
Because, it's really worth it. And I'm really excited also because on my way to Colombia, I'm meeting with somebody in Mexico who's interested in doing some liberty camps. And, Mexico recently elected a leftist. And his name is Obrador, or they call him AMLO because those are his initials. And he's doing everything he can right now to undermine the Mexican institutions and create an autocratic regime. And fighting against Obrador internally in Mexico is going to be really important if we're going to avoid something like Venezuela happening on our southern border.
So this 2 weeks ago, I think, and we're going to go like really off topic and I'll circle it back, I promise. WWE ran a big show in Saudi Arabia, and they've taken a lot of flack for that because they have this big deal with the Saudi Arabian government to put on a couple wrestling shows every year and do these big spectacles. And it's a propaganda thing. Saudi Arabia is paying them to do propaganda. Mm-hmm. And they don't let all of their wrestlers go. Like all the female wrestlers can't go compete. And then there's one of the wrestlers is Syrian that they have, one of their big guys. So they don't want him in the country. Mm-hmm. So yeah. So every time they do a pay-per-view in Saudi Arabia, he kicks off a you go to SammyForSyria.com and he does like this fundraising for like mobile medical facilities for doctors in Syria to go like treat patients in war zones, basically. Mm-hmm. Is that something that would be feasible in Venezuela, or does the state still have too much control and that would get seized?
Yeah, the state has too much control in Venezuela right now for me or for any American I know to enter Venezuela. I have a ton of contacts in Venezuela, and the plan is that as soon as the usurpation ends and I can get across the border, I'll be going and hopefully working in a hospital there on a volunteer basis. So getting across the border right now is not possible for most Americans, and certainly not for an American who's been a public voice against the usurpation. I mean, you've
instigator.
Sorry?
You're an instigator.
I'm an instigator, yes, and I will be an instigator for my whole life, I hope. You mentioned something about Saudi Arabia that is really promising, because that kind of a cultural exchange has the ability to change and open so many minds. And I think it's very important that we not shut off contact and not shut off commerce with people under oppressive regimes. I think it's really important that in whatever way they can, that the World Wrestling Entertainment Organization is able to deliver their content to Saudis, and it creates a little bit of friendship. Commerce creates friendship, and I'd obviously rather it be on more liberal terms, but you've got to take what you can get and then push for more when you can. And if we do that, I think we can take baby steps toward a freer world. But that kind of engagement is very positive in my view.
I think so. Because the WWE has taken a lot of flack for this. I agree. I think it's better to have them putting on wrestling shows than us selling bombs.
Agreed.
One of the things that they were working on, so they just had the third show there, and they went down to the wire trying to get a women's match on this card, and they couldn't do it. And the hope is that next time maybe the government relents and 2 women get to wrestle in Saudi Arabia.
Right, maybe, but you know what? Even if they don't, the viewers in Saudi Arabia know about this. It doesn't matter where in the world you are. The government cannot adequately control information on the internet because VPNs exist, because people talk in codes. They do all this. They know this. The viewers have to know about this controversy, and what that means is that they know that somewhere in the world, women's roles is not what it is in Saudi Arabia, and so they intuitively understand that kind of injustice, and it creates a little bit of internal pressure. Not as much pressure as we'd like, but it's this process of engagement that I think we have to go through. Again, it's not like I would love to just snap my fingers and make the Saudi monarchy go away. But in the absence of the ability to do that, I'd like to see us take baby steps, and with the hope that one day the Saudi monarchy falls, and hopefully what replaces it is a liberal or something more liberal, and Saudi Arabia can start to develop inclusive economic institutions, political freedoms, and grow into a free place. I mean, my wish for the world is that inclusive economic institutions, liberal democracies, and so forth will rise up everywhere, so that every human being has the opportunity to live a fully actualized life. Because when you live under these autocratic authoritarian regimes, your life is just like capped. You don't get to develop into who you are. You don't get to actualize your life. You don't get to realize your potential. And that's not just a loss for the people there. It's a loss for everybody. Because, maybe the person who would have developed a cure for HIV is a woman in Saudi Arabia who was denied entry to college. Maybe it's somebody killed in when you see that, free market capitalism goes to a new place, those people become new trading partners. And everybody in the world becomes richer because of that. So we all have an interest in the freedom of our brothers and sisters anywhere in the world.
You're absolutely correct. And when markets are free, people are more free. Right.
And I think that is a fundamental difference between what I think and what I think another school of thought in libertarianism thinks. There's an inward-looking school of thought in libertarianism that says we should be concerned with things that happen inside U.S. borders, and we should be nihilistic with respect to whatever happens anywhere else in the world. And that shocks my conscience. I cannot be nihilistic towards the plight of human beings who are oppressed in other places in the world. If there's somebody in the world who's not free, I'm not free.
Well, that's understanding, and I totally feel you. It's overwhelming because there's too many places where people are not free and so unfree. It's unbelievable. I get messages from people in countries all over the world who they say, yeah, I'm a libertarian, or I want to be, and I want to start a libertarian party here or some sort of group. And I'm like, do it. It just takes one person. But it's so sad that there are so many places that are so unfree.
Right. It is. And you see, little glimmers of hope in places. In Cuba, there's a libertarian party. They meet in secret. There aren't a lot of them, but these are some of the most amazing people. And they are spreading libertarian ideas. They've smuggled in libertarian books. They have discussions about free market economics in their houses. There's this undercurrent of, no matter where you are, the human spirit wants to be free, and libertarian ideas are attractive everywhere. So if you ever have somebody from somewhere else in the world who wants to start a libertarian party or wants to do something in the libertarian movement, send them my way. And chances are I may know somebody else in their country who does, or be able to connect them. Maybe I can go there and help them. This is my specialty, is the international libertarian movement, and I'm always eager to meet people from anywhere in the world and be supportive of their goals to promote these ideas in places where it's a lot harder to promote them than in the U.S.
Well, yeah, you have obviously much more reach and much more opportunity to do that. I will definitely, the next time I get one of these, and you know what, I'm going to go search through and hook you up with some people.
Great. I appreciate that.
Absolutely. I appreciate everything you do. It's unbelievable, honestly, Kyle.
I remember, this hasn't happened as much recently, but last year I was getting a lot of African friend requests from Africa, and I would accept them because I would just go through and do like mass accepting, and then it's like, oh no, this is going to be someone asking me for money, because that's typically how that goes. But no, if a lot of these people were asking for books, and maybe that's a form of currency, and maybe it is asking for money, but they seemed more interested in like, can you send me books about libertarianism?
Right, and I mean, I've tried to send as many as I can, the libertarians in Africa are really great people. You know, it's sub-Saharan Africa. They suffer in the ways that we, on a daily basis, in ways that we would find unimaginable. My first day in Uganda, I saw somebody get hit by a car, and ended up taking them in my car with my driver to the hospital, offering to help out the doctor, and realizing just how extremely deficient everything was. And I got to know how people there live, and oh my God, it's rough, you know, but in the midst of all of this hardship, you know, in Uganda, they have a libertarian study and lending library that I got to visit, and they have all kinds of libertarian books on the shelves. People come there, borrow a book, sit there and read it, talk about whatever. They're with so little, they've done so much already, and I can't wait to see what they do in the future.
That's awesome. You know, I heard, I can't remember if, was it when we had Zach Foster on, when he was talking about Venezuela, talking about downloading books onto USBs and taking those because it's small, it's compact, and the government takes and seizes any kind of literature that they find on people.
Mm-hmm.
Is that accurate?
Yeah, exactly. So USBs, digital books are really great because you can also send them electronically sometimes. You do reach a limitation because people need to be able to access the USB, but these are things that can kind of be done inside the country. I think it's technology has really been our friend. The internet has penetrated even the darkest corners of the earth, and we can get our ideas in there. You know, they're doing the same thing in North Korea. They're putting rice in water bottles, and inside the rice, they put a USB that's full of literature, South Korean dramas, all this kind of stuff, and they chuck it into the ocean where the current will take it to North Korea. And they've got confirmation that people in North Korea are picking these up. They pick it up for the rice, but then they also get a USB, or they get a feminine hygiene product along with it, or they get
that's amazing
medication. They get these things, so they're able to help the people of North Korea in this way. That's what our Korean friend talked about in Mongolia, is that project to send rice and information directly to the North Korean people.
That's an amazing program.
It is. I next time I'm in South Korea, I want to go and participate in throwing the bottles with the rice into the ocean.
Is there anybody else in the world who is more cut off than North Koreans from the rest of the world?
Maybe Turkmenistan. Maybe Turkmenistan. Turkmenistan has.
You might want to explain where that is, because I don't think most people.
But it's in Central Asia. It's one of the Central Asian stands, and I don't know anybody from Turkmenistan. I don't know anybody who's been able to go to Turkmenistan and fight for freedom there. I don't even know about like a Turkmenistan freedom movement yet, but I know that things are very, very, very bad in Turkmenistan. And so if there's anywhere in the world that would compare to North Korea, it's probably there, but everything's really opaque. So it's hard to say for sure which is worse.
Well,
So,
I guess
Scott, you haven't said anything this whole time, man.
Yeah, I'm sorry, Scott.
No, it's okay, man. I just taking it all in. It's been great listening to you talk. The things that I wanted to talk about this evening were I definitely wanted to talk a little bit more about your upcoming book, The White Coat Cartels. I'm very intrigued by that concept of that book. So tell us a little bit about that.
Is that out already? I keep forgetting.
It's not out yet. The first draft is written, and I'm working every day with my editor to make it better. My editor drives a very firm bargain or whatever. He's very very strict with me. So we've been working very hard, and my hope is within a couple of months we'll have it out. So here's the deal with the healthcare market in the United States. Everybody is suffering because prices are really high and services really bad. Why? Because regulation restricts entry into the profession and creates scarcity. That is the definition of a cartel. A cartel is when you have a few businesses who have a complete hold on the market. They basically cooperate and they exploit the consumer. And that's what's happening in medicine. Doctors have formed a cartel using state licensures, state medical boards, and control of the process to become a doctor. They've actually capped the numbers of doctors using the government. The pharmaceutical companies have a cartel using a Byzantine system of regulations. Hospitals have cartels. Every hospital you go to pretty much has a little bit of a monopoly on their own local market. And insurance companies have a cartel. Everywhere in the healthcare market what you see is scarcity prompted by regulation. And so the thesis of my book is that regulation creates scarcity in a market and it results in the exploitation of consumers. And that when you're suffering from healthcare problems in the United States, the problem is not the market, the problem is the government. And if we want to fix these problems, we need free market solutions that lead to more abundance and lower prices. The way markets work is abundance and low prices. That's the natural thing to happen. But when the government starts regulating, you get less abundance and higher prices. And that's why everybody's suffering so much. And if we don't start now to address these problems with the healthcare market, we're going to see nationalization of healthcare in the United States because people are desperate for a solution. And demagogues from the left are trying to sell them a bill of goods by saying the government can do a better job. We can't defend the current system. We have to propose radical changes that free the market so that consumers can win instead of having entrenched special interests winning.
So how can people... Sorry, go ahead, Scott.
No, take me back to a young Kyle Varner entering med school. I mean, had you already had this mindset of the medical field, or was there a moment in your career where the light bulb just kicked on for you, and you were like, hey, this is happening, and I'm surrounded by it,
Yeah, so I've always been a libertarian, but I didn't know that much about the healthcare market when I started going to medical school. And I went to a foreign medical school because I didn't have the grades to get into a medical school in the United States. And then what I learned is that almost 50% of the people who go to a foreign medical school don't ever end up practicing medicine because they can't get residencies. And then I started learning about why. And the reason is because organized medicine has basically used the government to cap the number of residency slots. So they've actually capped the supply of doctors. And so what I learned is that I had to fight tooth and nail to get a residency. And then once I got the residency, I was in the club. I was in the cartel. I could make the big bucks, not really have any competition. I have recruiters call me multiple times a day, every day. They won't leave me alone because I have something that's scarce. I have a medical license. And that scarcity plays to my favor. And so that's when I really started to understand. And I started looking at other sectors of the economy and realizing that barriers to entry are the huge, huge problem. I also, as a practicing doctor, began to understand really how horrible things are for patients in terms of the prices they pay and in terms of the service they get in your traditional medical centers. And I started becoming very interested in the direct primary care movement, which is where doctors reject the insurance companies and contract directly with their patients. I started getting very interested in things like health sharing organizations, in medical tourism, because I was a medical tourist myself while I was in medical school. I had surgery in Mexico that I could never have afforded in the United States. And so it really shaped my views of saying, hey, there are market-based solutions to this. And there are non-political market-based solutions as well. Because you can opt out of this compromise system by dropping your health insurance and getting on a health sharing plan. You can opt out of the hospital cartels by going to Mexico or other places in the world to receive surgeries. You can use direct primary care. And there's a whole basically a whole toolbox of tools that can get you lower prices, better service, and more control over your healthcare. And so I'm really committed to teaching people about those tools. And White Coat Cartels is the first step. But I've also recorded a approximately 6-hour video course teaching people how to take control of their healthcare. And that's called the Cash Patients Rebellion. If you go to drvarner.com/cash rebellion, you can sign up for when the course launches and you can get a 50% discount on it. But I think there are two sides. There's the political side. We have to fight on the political side to free the market.
What is your 6-hour video called again? I'm sorry. I want to write this down.
Rebellion. And it's drvarner.com/cash rebellion. And it's an entire course that includes supplementary reading materials, lots of information about direct primary care, about health sharing organizations, medical tourism, how to take care of yourself and opt out of the centralized third-party system.
Because I think a lot of people are looking towards cash-based healthcare because even when you have healthcare, like I know my insurance, I've been told by doctors and nurses I have good insurance.
Yeah, the way for them to treat you like a milk cow. All kinds of tests and all kinds of things. It can actually
my insurance is not really usable anymore like it used to be. Like copays are a thing of the past. That's ridiculous for good insurance. Like I work for a pretty big I work for an international company, a pretty large company, and my insurance is still shit. So I'm looking for a job. Zach just got a job. I have an interview with the place that he's going to, and this place offers you their insurance or a differential per hour to buy your own insurance. Mm-hmm. So it's pretty cool. They contract for the VA. So they process claims and try and help.
So actually, can I jump in on this part?
Please.
Because this is something I've had to deal with, and something this may be exciting for you that this is starting to happen. So you know how when you you see a disabled vet and they have the VA care and they're seeing someone out of the VA because the VA can't get them in on time, like that's a law now?
Yeah.
So something that was a really big problem is doctors weren't being paid for that.
Right.
And a lot of doctors would then refuse to see disabled veterans because of it. Well, it got to be such a problem that now the VA is subcontracting this company to come in and make sure that like all these doctors are getting paid properly. So it's like an external company coming in to make sure the money's there, and that like if there's a problem, like a paperwork issue, it gets fixed so that doctors will get paid and hopefully actually want to see disabled veterans again.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's no end to the kind of problems that happen when you take a third party and make them in charge of paying, because it induces really bad problems with incentives. The patients and the doctors no longer care what the cost is going to be, which means the third party has to start putting restrictions and rationing the care you receive. But now the patient is no longer in control. And so what we really need to move towards is a system where the patient has the money and they make the financial decision. And so, I would advocate, like for veterans, that they be given money, not care, and that they be then allowed to make decisions about what kind of care they want and what level of care they want. If they think that a cruise around the world is more important than a certain medical procedure that is being recommended, they should have the right not to get the medical procedure. But right now, that's not an option. So the decisions that are being made aren't reflective of the patient's actual preferences. And the way you change that is by putting the money into the hands of the patient. And only when we have the consequences of the decision as our own, do we actually get decisions that are rational. We have to bear the costs and then also the benefits. And the third-party payer system just rips that into shreds.
Well, let's hope that's the wave of the damn future, for doctors and patients alike.
I think it is the wave of the future. Direct primary care is catching on. People are rejecting this. We have to work on increasing the supply of doctors and mid-level providers, nurse practitioners, and physician assistants. Right now, there's huge fights about the practice rights of nurse practitioners and physician assistants all over the country. And my opinion is we need freedom. Let the nurse practitioners and PAs practice. Let them compete in an open market with doctors, and let patients be the judge. But instead, doctors want to go to state legislatures and try to keep the physician's assistants and nurse practitioners down, keep them under the doctor's thumb. A lot of good quality medical literature says that outcomes are the same between doctors and NPs and PAs. But doctors don't like that and call it into question. But they have a financial conflict of interest to do so. We need to let them decide. So that means let the patients decide.
You're like, this is your profession. So honestly, how much does a doctor need to know for the basics, like a kid coming in with a cold? Like,
well, you have to know. I think the more you know, the better, because you have to know when it's just a cold and when it's not. And sometimes things can be subtle, and years of experience can lead you to pick up some dangerous things that look benign to begin with. So I don't want to discount the importance of experience, but at the same time, you pay for that experience, and we're paying over $10,000 per year per person in the United States for healthcare. And so you have to have a balance, right, between paying for the experience and not. And I don't think there's any one person who can tell you where that balance is. But that's the beautiful thing about a decentralized market where individual consumers make decisions, is they find that balance, and it's what works for them. And so what I would just say is we have to take the decision making out of the centrally controlled government planned system. We have to take the central decision making away and put it in the hands of the patients, and they're going to do what's best for them. That's free market 101.
So you're talking about experience. So in my mind, that tells me a nurse practitioner with 30 years of medical experience is going to be better than a doctor fresh out of their residency.
I would agree with that, especially, depending on the specialty and depending on,
right, obviously.
Yeah, if you're a nurse practitioner who's worked in primary care for 30 years, or you're a doctor out of a 3-year residency, I think for most primary care, the nurse practitioner may be better. Or the doctor may be better because their training is more recent, depending on how much continuing education somebody's done. There are a lot of factors, but you can't have a centralized entity making the decision.
Is there a minimum per year of continuing ed for doctors, or is that every couple of years?
Well, it depends based on the state, but usually it's about 50 hours every 2 years of CME credits, which I actually find that I get just because I get CME credits based on a program that I use, which is a reference. So I look something up for my patient, and then it logs the time I spent reading for my patient, and it logs that as CME. And so I end up getting all my CME just by reading for my patients. When I have a patient where something isn't clear and I need to reference, I get CME credit for doing that. And so that's nice. But then they also have their special favorite class: opioid management, suicide prevention, LGBT healthcare. And I have so many state licenses that I get bogged down in a lot of this stuff. I have to take so many random classes. That's the pet project of this one medical board is this, and pet project of this medical board is that.
How many states are you licensed in?
25 as of today.
Holy shit.
Yeah, I'm working on getting rid of some of them because I don't want to pay the renewal fees. But it's necessary for my style of practice to have a lot of licenses, so that when, because I like to go somewhere when a hospital gets in real trouble in terms of staffing and the pay gets really good, and then I go there and help them out. And then once they get more people on board, I leave. And I just but I need to have a lot of licenses in order for those opportunities to come up regularly for me.
But yeah, that's a lot of fees.
So we do need to wrap up here because I've learned that my video files get too big when I let these conversations go on too long.
All right. Well, hey guys, thanks for having me. And remember, you can go to drvarner.com/cashrebellion, and you can get a 50% discount for when my course launches, which should be in the next couple of days.
Yep.
And I just also want to point out, in terms of people ask how they can help Venezuela, helpingvenezuela.com is a soup kitchen run in Venezuela, and they're providing food, meals to people who are malnourished. That's probably the number one thing you can do right now. I've made promise to a lot of activists in Venezuela that if they get in a situation where their life or their freedom is in danger because of their political activity, that I'll help finance their escape from the country. And if things go bad in Venezuela, or if things get worse in Venezuela and something like that happens, I may be calling on the libertarian community to help get our libertarian friends out. But right now, they want to stay and fight, and we need to support them in their fight.
Yep,
good for them. Fight the good for our brothers and sisters.
Definitely, if that becomes a thing, let us know immediately, and we'll blast it out.
Absolutely. Wonderful. Well, thank you, guys.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Varner, for coming on. Thank you, Scott, for jumping in. And you'll probably see a lot more of Scott. Because we're expanding to basically 2 podcasts a week, hopefully soon. You're seeing some of that already, so I'm gonna burn through co-hosts if I don't start rotating people in and out. So thank you, the Launchpad Media, the launchpadmedia.com. This episode will go up in a couple days. It has to go up on YouTube first. Thank you, everyone, for being a part of this, and we'll see you next week.